This meeting
Good
is being
afternoon.
recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar at NiceGate. I'm Sean McDonough, Corporate Relations Manager and Member Engagement Coordinator with NiceGate. We're pleased that you can take part of your time and join with us today as we share some great insight and resources for one of our wonderful corporate council members, WeVideo. Today's session, we're going to be focusing in on benefits of implementing multimedia creation and video editing in the K-12 classroom. As we get started, just a couple of quick reminder for many of you who have been on many of our Zoom calls, we do ask that you mute your microphones and turn your video cameras off if you're not asking any other questions. It'll help kind of minimize distractions for our presenters. We are recording today's session, and I'll provide a link of where that recording will be available within 24 hours on the NiceGate site, and I'll put that in the chat. The chat will be used as a great way for you to kind of share your questions and comments with other panelists and attendees. Just please make sure that when you are using chat, you're labeling the everyone feature. That way your comment might resonate with one of your colleagues who's on for today's session. I'll, at the end of today's webinar, just have a couple other reminders about some other upcoming NiceGate events that we have as we kind of lead into the spring. But right now, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Ryan Kochevar from WeVideo, who's going to start us off and introduce the rest of our panelists for today's session. Good afternoon, Ryan.
Hi, Sean. Thank you so much. We're happy to be here as part of the NiceGate webinar series. And as Sean mentioned, today's topic is the benefits of implementing multimedia creation and video editing into K-12 classrooms. We have an esteemed panel of digital media experts with us today to talk with us about their experiences of integrating multimedia creation and video editing into their classrooms, the benefits that they've seen and the student outcomes that they've experienced with their kids, and they're going to be sharing some instructional strategies about how they've accomplished this. So as Sean said, I'm Ryan Kochevar from WeVideo. I'm our teaching and learning specialist. My role here is to help teachers and other educators access resources to make video editing more seamlessly integrated into their curriculum and their classroom environment. So hoping to accomplish some of that with you all today. The panelists that are joining us, first is we have Andre Soto. And Andre was an early adopter of educational technology and used his 8 years of professional production experience to craft a curriculum rooted in media literacy, audio-visual production, and design thinking that can be used from kindergarten through high school. Over the past 16 years, he's continued to use innovative teaching strategies to introduce students and colleagues to the tools and techniques of multimedia production. Andre holds a professional certification in both visual arts and educational technology, and currently teaches digital media at Blind Brook Middle School in Rye Brook, New York. So welcome, Andre. Thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you.
Our next panelist is Bruce Reicher. Bruce has been an educator for over 20 years in all grade levels. He is a level 1 and 2 Google certified teacher, Codesters Python coding ambassador, BrainPop certified educator, Wakelet ambassador, and a WeVideo ambassador. He has a master's degree in elementary education and administration, and has also been on the board of education member for the past 7 years. Bruce is also a co-author of the book Scripted, an educator's guide to media in the classroom. Welcome, Bruce. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me today.
And our final panelist is Dr. Fawn Canady. She is an assistant professor of adolescent and digital literacies at Sonoma State University in Rohnert Park, California. She's a former English teacher with experience at a project-based learning, career, and technical academy. Her professional experience includes district level positions in the 5th largest school district in the United States as a project facilitator, incorporating innovative technology programs and supporting new and experienced teachers in digital technology integration. Her scholarship focuses on digital multimodal composing practices that bridge in and out of school literacies. So thank you for being here with us, and welcome, Fawn.
Hi, everyone.
All right, so we're gonna start off, and I'm gonna drive the conversation, and our panelists are gonna answer and speak to their experiences, as I said, on integrating some of their multimedia techniques into their classroom spaces and what they've seen that it offers to their kids. I'm going to drop in a link to resources in the chat if a panelist mentions an activity or a project that they've done, they'll point you to that resource and either share the screen, or you can follow along by clicking into that Google Doc. It should be able for you to view, and you should be able to access those links as well. If you cannot, just please chat, put it in the chat, and I can see about the permissions on that document. But wanted you to have access to resources, make sure you could follow along and see visuals if you want a more concrete example of what the folks are talking about. All right, so let's get started. So first, let's talk first about how what kinds of projects that you've all kind of integrated and implemented into your spaces, and through that implementation of these projects and video editing and production, what kinds of awesome things have you seen from your kids or from your students that they've accomplished? And go ahead and Bruce, we'll start with you on this one.
All right, sounds great. Well, I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in a middle school in New Jersey. And I really think the projects I'm going to talk about is I let my curriculum drive what the video projects are going to be. So for example, I teach digital leadership in 6th grade. I do a 6th grade project where kids go and research one of the different types of digital citizenship and leadership, research it on brainpop.com, and then they take their facts, put it into a WeVideo. They come up with their own quiz questions to put into a Kahoot. And then as a culminating activity, we play all their WeVideos, followed by them coming up with their Chromebooks and playing their Kahoots. In 8th grade, I'm lucky enough to be a TV production teacher, and we built a TV studio in our school. So all the content that we make in 8th grade eventually ends up on the TV show, and it's all stories about the school and community that go on there. So I think a really important point with any of these projects is to start small, especially if you never used video editing before. And I would let your curriculum drive the video project instead of the other way around. I'm going to do a podcast and then I'll figure out if it's audio, what the project's going to be. And I know teachers are super busy now, and I would do what you're normally doing and start small with extensions of video or audio projects.
Yeah, I would also agree. I teach 6th and 7th grade and 8th grade as well. And what I've done over the last, I've been at my current district now going on 9 years. And when I started, it was a straight up computer technology class, typing, keyboarding, things like that. I still do all that stuff. I just sort of incorporated it into this multimedia production curriculum that spans from 6th grade up until 8th grade. 8th grade is an elective, so I see about half the student body by 8th grade, not the full student body, but 6th and 7th grade I see everyone. I start out in 6th grade with teaching them design principles and animation as a way to introduce the dynamics of production and the skills and the patience that are needed to create good quality production design. And animation is one of the best ways to do that, I think. And then in 7th grade they dive deep into video production. We are using editing and cameras and learning framing and composition. And today we were having we went outside because it was beautiful, and had the kids working on rule of thirds and leading lines and all those kind of devices that used for visual storytelling. So 7th grade is heavy on visual storytelling and technique. And then we also do some commercials and things like that, and documentaries, mini documentaries. And then in 8th grade is more of a full-on production design class. I get them for a whole semester for 2 quarters. So I dive deep into documentary. Right now they're working on a silent film from brainstorming the idea of the story. Right now we're at treatments, and it's getting exciting. And they also do passion projects and some other mini documentaries as well in the 8th grade. I would wholeheartedly agree with Bruce. You got to start small. You have to learn the basics yourself before you can actually teach it. because I always say it's very simple. The idea is simple. You know, it's like creating a collage. It's cutting and pasting, but it's not easy. You know, it requires a lot of practice and a lot of experience, and that's how you learn it. You know, you start to learn how to do little things here and there. You know, don't pile on too much. And again, when you're actually doing something with students, you know, keep it short form. You know, make the content a bit easier depending on how much time you have. You know, it's hard to get kids to write a full script and to conceptualize, you know, grand production designs. So, you know, I always keep my formats short, 30 seconds, 60 seconds. You know, partly because you also don't want to have to sit through 10, 15-minute videos of middle school kids. I mean, I love them, but sometimes it's like, what? They have very interesting sense of humor, and it doesn't quite, you know, always you know, hit with the older folks. But it's a lot of fun. I think that it's probably it makes my job a lot easier knowing that, you know, I get to come in and make fun projects with kids. It's really cool.
So I come at this from a completely different perspective because I was a content area teacher first. I taught English in high school in Las Vegas, is where I started in 2005. And I started using technology in my English classrooms. I taught everything from, you know, just the regular classes at the grade level all the way up to the AP, you know, language and composition and literature courses. And I started using technology because I felt like the texts that we read and create in the world were a way to apprentice students into developing literacies for English to make sense as a connection to the real world. And, you know, they use digital media all the time, even back in 2005. Although back in 2005, I had to fight to get a lot of these tools into the classroom. So I also found that when I incorporated media into the classroom, that my students were always, even when we were talking about literature, they were making connections and thinking in multimedia, right? So they were talking about music or film or commercials or memes, videos, video games, when they were trying to make meaning out of what we were doing in English. And so it just made sense for me to do that. And then from there, losing my voice, from there, I started branching out. Like, I like the advice to start small because I started with blogging with my students, and then they started introducing things like video embedded into their blogs, things like that. And I used them as experts to help me learn more about how they were using different kinds of digital tools. I was at a project-based learning school, and I feel like for content area teachers, that's a really great way to provide real purpose and audience to incorporate these kinds of projects. So through project-based learning, we've done things like public service announcements, elevator speeches, TED Talks. We've done video recorded oral histories and interviews, and then made digital stories out of those. We even used video to capture guerrilla theater. So when we would do Shakespeare, for example, The Tempest, some of my favorite were from when we did The Tempest one year. You know, they would have to memorize their lines, their roles, and then perform it like spontaneously in some sort of public space and record it. So one recording, when Caliban was moaning and groaning on the ground, somebody called the paramedics at a mall, and they showed up in the video. So, you know, we just found all sorts of innovative ways to do it. I've also used it for reflection. So whether they created videos and it was kind of like a behind the scenes, or, you know, a director's cut, or even just reflecting on projects, even in the college courses that I teach, I've used video, diary style journals. digital storytelling, of course, recreating scenes in plays and books, video game playthroughs that were related to literature, story center. I was able to sit in on a story mapping course with them, and that's my next obsession, thinking about how we can do stories in place and then put them in maps. And then I did research around digital self-portraits in classrooms, where students chose, different media and modes to tell something, essential about themselves through an interactive platform. It could be social media. And so many of them chose to use Draw My Life videos, video memoirs. They included their videos, like they've made collages of videos that they had recorded for social media. Yeah, a lot of different ways, but I think that the most impactful for my students was when we, as a really concrete example, when we, instead of doing a research paper, we did multimedia narrative nonfiction. And we wrote, we researched, and we did a little bit of drafting first after we had done some extensive research and kind of framed a storyline. And then the students had to share with peers their writing and ask what the story wanted. And I think that a better question was, where would you want to use your mobile device as you're reading? Where would you want to look up a map or a word or a place, or, see a video of, something happening? Because we had people researching everything from like summer concerts, like the Warped Tour, like that would be a great opportunity for a video. So they would annotate stories and make suggestions where multimedia would fit. And so, yeah, just a lot of different ways in the English classroom. It really just changed the way I taught English, the way that I saw my role as a teacher.
I was going to add to that like a great place to start, because I think it's hard just to get started, is just use what you have. So if you have Chromebook, if you have tablets, if you have anything that has a camera and a microphone, is a great place to start. And depending on the level, and this has changed over time, especially with remote learning. I know in my school it's loosened a little, of the kids using their phones. They have a 4K camera on their phone, most of them, and a pretty decent microphone. So with remote learning, that was perfect. But I think it's opened it up a little bit. And, you start seeing now some films and movies that are even made, on whatever type of phone it might be, that are shot in 4K and are amazing. And the point is just to start small. And even if you don't know where to start, give the kids a choice on different projects. And it might be on extension activities that they're doing. And, instead of doing a reflection, like, Fawn was saying, a lot of people do exit tickets. They might do it on paper. Give them the choice. Put the camera on in your Chromebook and tell me in 30 seconds or less what you learned with this lesson, and kind of ease into it that way. So you're not taking on like a very big project if it's like the very first one that you're doing, with your students.
And one of the great things about using WeVideo for that is the stock media feature. There's so much stock media in WeVideo that if you are just trying to get them to understand, if you're limited with resources, let's say you don't have cameras, let's say your kids don't have phones, or very young kids who might not have phones, the stock media really offers a chance for you to still teach composition and continuity and things like that, without having to actually go out and shoot your own video. It's great for introduction to it, and for a low resource, even showing some of the production design elements and things like that. I have the kids use their phones exclusively, because I do have some cameras, but I just find it a lot easier. And once you get past the sort of classroom discipline of it all, which is difficult at first and is kind of an ongoing thing. But if you can really lock them down and let them know that when they pull out that phone, it's not a phone anymore. It's a camera, it's a microphone, it's a production studio. They start to jump on board, and keep them busy, because then they don't have a chance to text their moms whenever they get a chance to.
I think that's so important, because I'm observing teachers, student teachers, and they have their phones checked in when they come in the door. And I understand, having to fight with the texting and everything else, but, really thinking of it then as the tool and what you're using it for, I think is really important. And what you both said reminded me of, we've done a lot of genre studies. So I don't have a background in media and film, or, the credentials that you had. But what I did do with students was we would use mentor texts, and we would do genre studies, and really look at things that you never paid any attention to, like how shots were used, and looking for the language, then like what, a close-up and what that does for you. And so the kids actually did all that. They found the language. They were noticing like how quickly, like you don't realize until you've actually tried to create a video, how fast those transitions are. And then using tools like WeVideo is easier because they're then paying attention. And the magic revision, even in writing, or whether you're producing video, that's where the magic happens, right? We call it revision in English, but the editing is where the magic happens. But genre study was a really great way to start. And then I didn't have to be the expert. We were figuring that out together, like what worked and what didn't.
I'm so glad I'm so glad you said that point, just because we all have the experts right in front of us. I mean, kindergarten through 12th, there's not one student who didn't grow up on the internet and YouTube in your classroom right now. So if you don't need to know how to do it yourself. If you have a kid who's an expert at it and awesome at it, it's great for them also to come up and to show the other students. Sorry, Andre.
No, that's okay. No, I was going to say, going back to, the point of making a video, like instead of an exit ticket or something like that, a lot of kids are sort of worried about being on camera, and so giving the video gives them an option. You don't have to be on camera. You don't have to do a voiceover. You can add, text slides, and you can use stock media or footage of other things. I think, one of the things that I try to push in my class is that you don't have to be in front of the camera all the time. When I was doing passion projects with the 8th graders, I would get kids who would do this travel vlog, and everywhere they went, it was like, hey, this is me in Disney. And I'm like, where's Disney? And they're like, no, it's just me. We're just going to follow me around while I talk about the things that I'm looking at. And I was like, and it's a learning opportunity to talk about cutaways and match cuts and things like that. But it's a little difficult to get them to understand that. And that was one of my early mistakes when I first started doing this stuff, was that I would jump into projects and not spend enough time teaching them the basic vocabulary of visual storytelling, those medium shots, long shots, tight shots, extreme close, all those things that are so important to this genre. And I would try to teach it on the fly, and it was a very difficult process. So what I started to do was front load my semester with exercises. You're going to go out and just shoot a series of all these things. There's no content, there's nothing, just shoot it and string it together and label it. Similar to your 6-word story, Bruce, it was just kind of like, I just want you to get the shots. And even that is a struggle for them sometimes, because they're like, what, is there a story? Do I have to tell something? Do I have to show something? No, just get the shots. Just go out there with your partner. They shoot you, you shoot them. Then you bring it back to the computer and edit it together. And it goes to show you how much they feel like they need to be on the camera. I would have them working as partners, and they would always use the video of them as their project, not the one that they shot. And it never occurred to me to explain that. But then I started getting all these submissions, and I'm like, wait, that's you. You didn't shoot that. They're like, no, I'm in it. I'm like, that's not your project. You produced the one you shot. So it's funny, the stuff that they don't really, you have to kind of be there to guide them through those little details.
Yeah, I found for doing this through a long time, and to talk about your point, Andre, would just give them a little bit at a time. I used to, give them all the directions to the project, and now I'm a little bit more to doing like news features for our morning TV show. Let me just, go through the different, you'll appreciate this, Fawn, of like writing steps of brainstorm it, plan it. The better they plan it, the better it's going to be. And then go into voiceovers first before we even touch the cameras, and really try to break it down into chunks for them. Because I think if you give them everything at once, not all the students, but some get a little bit overwhelmed of seeing like the whole rubric at once or all the directions at once. So I really try to tailor my mini lessons of, we're doing voiceover today. This is what we're going to concentrate on. Just the voiceover, how you're going to record it, tools you could use in WeVideo and, and other platforms, and, why the audio is so important, maybe more important than the video, of how it sounds, and to get, student voice. And that would be a mistake I made early on too, of just trying to show everything. And then they're like, okay, which part, do we start with? And just break it down into little pieces. And I have a feeling my classroom is similar to Andre's, that the kids are out all the time with the equipment. So, I do one long lesson on how to use like our cameras, which are camcorders, Canon camcorders. And I tell them, I'm like, there's a half hour, this is the longest lesson I'm going to give you, but I want to go through everything so you don't have other issues that students might have had in the past of the microphone being off, or, a whole bunch of little things like that. 10 minutes or less is really, when I look at like a 48-minute class, the longest I'm going to go is 10 minutes, like with a lesson.
I actually did a lot of those too, the mini lessons, and I had them bring in their scripts or their storyboards before they could go out. And we all had a conversation the other day about, not being in our classroom spaces. And so as an English teacher, my kids were all over campus, and I had a scooter. Actually, I would ride around to go find them and check in on them. But, they wanted to be a part of that. And so they would bring in their, written scripts and their storyboards, and I did it in heels too, by the way. And they would bring a razor. Yeah. And and they would bring that in because they wanted to be a part of it. They wanted to be able to move into different parts of production. And then as an English teacher, moving into different project-based learning kind of structures allowed me to do the mini lessons, to also like create these need to know moments where we'd be like, hey, Mark and Rajiv are going to be, working on, editing, sound in WeVideo. So, if anybody else wants to try, or to learn how to do that, they're meeting over here. And we would, create these kind of like small working groups after the, good of the group morning session. And so everybody would move around and support each other. And so I feel like too, that was really, when we talk about the benefits, and this came up in our conversation the other day, here they are, really being presented as capable and knowledgeable in front of their peers. They're sharing their expertise, and there was that fluid mentorship in the classroom, and I was learning from them too. And so it really changed the dynamic of how we did English.
It's one of the things that I love about teaching this stuff, is that I get to see these kids in a completely different way than any other teacher, sometimes even their parents. See them, see how they work, see how they think, see what they care about, like when you do these passion projects, or when you give them choice, I mean, and everyone, all their peers get to see them. And it's a really amazing way to have them connect with each other. It was great over, especially the last couple of years, when there was so little sort of actual connection. But having, Bruce, you mentioned audio. I always start out my 7th grade curriculum with a podcast, because I want them to understand how important audio is. I always tell them audio is the most important. Even in a video, you can have the most glorious, beautiful video, but if your audio is messed up, your production quality drops by half. And so, I do a very in-depth audio lesson with them. I wait for a windy day, and I say, all right, we're going outside and we're going to go record some interviews. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yep, we're doing it. And they've never recorded an interview in their life. They don't even. And so the point is to show them how they need to plan, how they need to choose the right location, right day, right, temperature and all that kind of stuff. How the light, low bright light doesn't always work, all that kind of stuff. and also showing them. I use Gravity, clips from the movie Gravity with Sandra Bullock, which is an amazing sound design. The movie itself was just amazing in terms of its sound design, and a clip from the Last Jedi, the Star Wars, in the end when she like hyperspaces through this thing and it explodes, but it's dead silent, like all the audio cuts out. So we talk about how audio is so important that the lack of sound is almost just as important as sound itself. So it really, and then we go into I just have them interview each other and create a podcast of two, I pair them up and just send them out and say, craft some good questions. We go through a questioning lesson, and then have them create podcasts of just a simple interview of each other about very specifically about something. Like, so they find the passion of their partner, and then they interview them on that. So that it's not like, oh, where do you live? How do you, like, it's a little bit more in depth and detailed. And they get a lot out of it, and they're paired up with somebody they don't know very well, and it's great to see them sort of connecting with kids that they don't normally sit with and connect with. It's really nice.
Yeah, it came up as a big topic yesterday of like SEL, social emotional learning, of video and audio is like fantastic for it. And in light of remote learning and everybody was home for whatever period of time, a year, whatever it may be, I mean, the stats don't lie that anxiety, depression, everything has doubled, and, in terms of percentages, and for adults and obviously also for our students. And to give, kids voice and to give them, make them feel good about themselves, I think is a really nice offshoot of this. I'm lucky enough that we do a live TV show every single morning. And I was telling my friends yesterday that I have 8th grade students that come in and say, I haven't woken up this early in like years, but like I want to be here, whether they're on air, behind the scenes, to be a part of a team and to do it. And that's one of the most rewarding things that you don't plan, but it just happens naturally, that, they feel good about themselves, and wherever they're starting, they get to see, their growth with whatever medium they're using.
So that's one thing that I think came up throughout the conversation yesterday, was the social emotional impact of this kind of engaging work that you're all doing. And, as you talked through those different activities that you've engaged with, I heard, very expert and professional level skill building in some of the activities, right? Teaching kids this very specific skill in terms of video production. But then I also heard more routine ideas for using video for exit tickets, right? Or screencasting their thinking, or providing space for a student to choose how they represent the knowledge that they've gained in the classroom, or how they're showing you what they understand that you're teaching them, which is to me, that's a really powerful reason to use this kind of learning in the classroom. So let's stay in that space of sort of the benefits or the outcomes you've seen. And I know Bruce just touched on social emotional learning, but how about, Fawn or Andre, what kinds of social emotional benefits have you seen through this work? Because I think that's a really important thing that we can focus on.
Fawn, would you like to go?
Oh, go ahead.
I think some of the coolest things I've seen in the last couple of years are students who I've seen, because I see them 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I really get to see them grow. And I see students coming in 6th grade who don't say a word, literally, do not say a word. They go through every single class quiet. They do what they need to do. They fly under the radar, but you never hear their voice at all, literally. And then, that student, you give them a microphone and a project to do, and they go and do it. And they get over any fears that they have. The audio, the voiceover, audio lesson is always the first one, because that's like the most jarring, right? We can't stand hearing our voices recorded. And so that's what I say. I'm like, listen, you're about to be really uncomfortable if you've never done this before. You're going to sound weird, and yes, that's how you sound to us. And and it's great to see them get over that, and it's great to see them build build that confidence. I had a girl this year that, I mean, probably in my 18 years of teaching, it was one of the most touching moments I've seen. You know, she was deathly afraid of presenting her video. She did not want to stand in front of class and introduce it. She asked me a week leading up to the presentations, can I do it solo, blah, blah, blah. And normally I would let her, but for some reason I pushed her. I was like, no, I think you can do it. I want you to do it. And even up to the moment where she was in the room, and I felt a little bad because I was like, kind of like, come on, you can do it. And then the rest of the class picked up on it, and not in a sarcastic way, they cheered her on to do this. And she did it, and she did it amazingly. And when she was done, like, I could see she was still so embarrassed and so worried about like what happened, but she felt good about it. And the kids were clapping and they loved it. And she actually did an amazing job. She was, I mean, that's why I was pushing her to do it, because she was the exemplar in that class. And I needed her to sort of like prove it to herself, but also prove it to all those other kids that, like, listen, she's the one you should be following and learning from, because she knows this stuff. And it was amazing. It was like very heartwarming to see that happen. And that happens not on necessarily that scale, but that happens a lot. Like seeing those moments where kids just accomplish something and see it and see other people reacting the way they're supposed to react. It's an incredible confidence builder during, especially middle school, which is like the worst time of life, you know, like you're going through every possible change in your entire being. And, you know, and so it's a lot for these kids to put them out there, put themselves out there like that. So I gain an incredible respect for all of them through all the work that they do in this class.
I think I come back to perseverance, that because I also had students who it was their voice, like whether they were behind the camera or they were doing the technical work or, you know, something else, the voice that they, you know, didn't share with us in class discussions, or they weren't confident in writing or the other aspects of the English language arts. But I also come back to perseverance quite a bit. And we talked about this when we chatted the other day. I had just to see the accomplishment when, you know, they're sharing or showcasing their final pieces. I had a student once who, you know, we were going over her story, and she threw her papers up in the air and said, I just want to do a regular research paper. But at the end had this, you know, really beautiful, you know, finished product. And so to see them, you know, stick it out and, you know, and problem solve and, you know, and be really proud of what they've accomplished is really priceless. We did a lot of really public things too, not for everything. So, you know, you start small. We tend to go to the bigger projects, and those sound really intimidating. But we've had like public interactive museum exhibits and things like that, where family would come and see what they have done. And I've never seen them dig into content so much as when they have that level of choice and creative freedom. And that came at the end of the year, right after we'd done a lot of other things. I think too, another important part of the social and emotional piece and the benefits for me was, so it changed my teaching, and the teachers that I've worked with, it's changed their teaching. And so when we did the digital self-portrait project, the second time we did it, the teacher was like, okay, I don't know how to assess this. Like, it changed her perspectives on, you know, how to assess kids and the work that they do, you know, like putting a grade on, you know, all of their hard work. And so instead it shifted from grades to co-constructed rubrics. Like, well, you know, what is a good video? And they would do those genre studies and talk about, you know, what is creativity? And we would build it and co-construct it together. And they use that as a tool to give each other feedback and for us to give them feedback. And it just really kind of gave them that ownership that they normally don't have in that space. And I think that it comes through, you know, just changing the paradigm through projects like this, using video or other kinds of multimedia.
mean, I can add to that. I'm a big fan of like the 1 point rubrics. Instead of giving them a whole rubric with 1 through 4 or 1 through 6, like you're either doing it or you're not. And if you're not doing it, what are ways that you can get to the other side, to be able to do it? And as far as the kids, I wrote down on my piece of paper, I'm still going old school with a pen, like introverts and extroverts, like there's a lot of kids who are introverts, and there's a lot of famous, people like David Letterman who, they're introverts in, their day-to-day life, but the minute the camera comes on and, someone points to them and gives them the cue to go, then, introverts, a lot of them really shine in this. And I was sharing when we spoke this week with everybody, a lot of the students who are extroverts who you think are going to be amazing in front of the camera sometimes are not so much. And you would think the most outgoing kids that would come through with the camera. And sometimes it does, but more times than not, I'm really proud of kids who are introverts, and I let the kids pick the jobs they want to do on our particular show. And a lot of times I'll hold my breath when someone picks a job and says, I want to be the announcer, I want to be the weather person. But if they really want to do it and you give them a safe space to be able to do it, and I don't expect perfection when they're doing like our show, we make it as casual as possible. Kids really, thrive in that. And it's great to see kids who are more quiet or introvert, whatever word we want to use, and they shine a lot of times, with media of audio and video.
And there's so many different roles to play that there's something for everybody, right? They like to write, they can, you have kids who really take on, I've had a lot of kids over the last couple of years because I got so much deeper the way I sort of modified my curriculum over the last 2 years, and it became a little bit more editing based. I have a lot of kids that are like, wow, I love editing. Like I don't really like shooting that much, but I love editing. I love taking, things and fine tuning and all that stuff. And I get that because, I started out as a photographer, videographer, doing a lot of the visuals. But once I started editing, I never did anything else. It was so like, this is my thing. Like, this is where you get to tell the story. This is where you see how all the pieces fit. And you're always working directly with the producer and the director and the, and getting all that expertise and just seeing that around you. It's really an amazing thing. So there's so many different places for students to fit that, and in multiple ways, right? They like to bounce around and try to other things. And, but if they find their thing, that, it's also really, really powerful.
When you both were talking, it made me think of a project I did with middle school students where they researched screen time and kind of took the perspective of, they joined the conversation, but, by interjecting students' voices. And so they surveyed, they did the research to see, what experts, parents, pediatricians, all sorts of people said about screen time. And then they surveyed the school, the student body, and then they did interviews to kind of add that, what do you call it? The story of people, and put that together in video for parents and school board members to show their perspective of screen time. And so a lot of times too, these, they find their voice, they find their niche, but they also find a wider audience, which I think is really important.
And I think too, I mean, it's not the purpose of doing it, but we spoke yesterday too of like future skills that students are going to need. And I put it in the doc that was shared of the World Economic Forum. Every 5 years, they come out with, these are the 10 skills that employers are looking for. And over the last 5 years, I think creativity was like number 9 in 15, and now it's like creeping up to number 2. So like things that future employers are looking for, and even different things we're talking about today of working collaboratively with other people, doing problem solving. I don't think it's meant to do this, but I think it solves a lot of those soft skills without saying, hey, today our lesson is on soft skills, let's go work with someone. It's more like, you're in a group and you're going to figure out your roles, and whoever is comfortable, doing what they're doing. And I like to give students choice, to be able to do that. They really thrive with that. And I was sharing, I've heard forever since I've been teaching that kids in kindergarten, most of the jobs they're going to have when they're adults, 50% of them aren't even created yet. So you're going to have to be real, do a lot of metacognition of, learning how to learn. And I think a lot of these skills tie right into that. And again, it's not the reason to do it, but it's an amazing offshoot, for these students. And as they go through their career, when they're in high school, even to apply to college, they could use all these video and audio skills when they're, applying to schools and beyond that, to a regular job.
Yeah, and it's that sort of mix of the technical hard skills that they're acquiring and what we might call the soft skills in terms of the 4 C's of the 21st century learning framework, or these future ready skills that we're seeing now. And it's sort of this nice confluence of the lessons and the activities, providing the space where students can gain both kinds of skills in that moment. Let's shift the conversation in the last 10 minutes to talking about teachers that may not have the experience that you all have, or that you brought into the space when you first started, right? With your backgrounds in media, and how teachers could maybe take the leap into this, right? So for some, it feels like a big leap. Some that have been trained in more, maybe, dare I say, traditional pedagogy, that maybe want to feel this, desire to shift some of their practices in the classroom, and how can video help with that? And then where's a good place to get started? Where's a good place to maybe take the leap, in your opinions? Like what would you offer as a piece of advice for folks that want to dip a toe or get started with this?
I mean, I can share. When we made the transition from iMovie to WeVideo and iPads over to Chromebook 6 or 7 years ago, I was totally lost in what was I going to do in WeVideo. And wevideo.com/academy, although an academy sounds like something you pay for, it's completely free, and they're all little 2-minute clips on not only how to set it up, but more importantly, how to do all of the little tiny skills. And that's where I learned how to do it. I'm a visual learner. Instead of reading a book on it, to go there, and teachers could certainly use that, and also students. And just a quick second point, even on the WeVideo website, if you go through the education tab, there are tons of exemplars that you can search through on there by grade level and also by subject. And that's also just a good place to start, of just get an idea of what could I do with my students.
Yeah, and once you get, because I think you do have to, as a teacher, you don't have to be able to do it incredibly well, but you need to understand the process, right? Like as a director, I always wanted to know what every job that I was directing did, so that I could relate. I'm not going to tell them how to do their job, but I want to know the process if I'm going to be saying, hey, I need you to do this, I need you to do that. So it just makes it more comfortable for you as a teacher if you know the process. So watching those academy videos, linking up with somebody who does know how to do it, it's just good to understand it, even if you're not actually doing it. And then I think, in terms of what to do in your class, you have to look at your curriculum. You have to really sort of say, like, where could this, because it could honestly fit anywhere. You could, you have so many different avenues. You have PSAs, you have documentaries, you have biographies, you have interviews. There's so many tie-ins to absolutely every single discipline and across the board. And it's just a matter of seeing where it could fit for you. Choose one of those things. If you have a specific spot, like, I think like those lame duck days, even where you have like a couple of days before break and you want to kind of play around with something, that's a good time to experiment. One of the first times I did the first time I did a commercial project where the kids actually went through marketing and advertising was when I was remodeling my classroom. I was, getting new furniture and all the flexible seating and all that stuff. And so the first thing I brought in were chairs. And I didn't want to just like go on Steelcase and like order the buoys and all the like cool stuff that everybody was getting at the time. I wanted the kids to choose what chairs they thought were the most comfortable. So I purchased 2 of 3 different styles of chairs. And then I had them along with the traditional chairs we already had in the room. And then they went through a whole entire process of market research. They tested out every single chair themselves. They took notes. They shared those notes in like big Socratic seminars. And, you know, it was really like a big process. They did forms, and then they brought the chairs to other people. They had, you know, adults sitting in them, and, you know, and then they crafted, using all of that market research, I assigned them a chair randomly, and then they had to create a marketing campaign for that chair. You know, I always joke, I have this compilation video that I created set to Alicia Keys' Fallen, because they were all, when they were trying to like show the other chairs weren't good, they were like, oh, they're dangerous, you can fall off of them. So I had so much video of kids purposely falling off of chairs. It was pretty funny. Some of them hurt themselves, not bad, but it was like, they were method actors. They were really into their craft.
Yeah, I would just echo what was said. I think starting with what you know, we do this thing, we do prototyping in one of my ed tech courses where you just try it, like, you know, small stakes, just try it out, because I also agree that it's really important that you kind of understand the process so that you can support the kids. But then I relied on them as experts a lot of time. I've even done teaching schedules where, you know, they were in charge of the mini lesson. You know, somebody would show me something cool that they did, and I'd be like, okay, great, you're going to lead us tomorrow in the mini lesson. So relying on students, and starting with content. Just start with what you know, and you know, try something small. And it could be like doing design sprints, for example, or using, you know, the design thinking process is a great way to do this, I think. So
I mean, the other thing I could add to Fawn is that, and I've seen this happen quite a bit, even if you choose a small little project, like make a 30-second commercial about where you're going to go in a world language class, you know, many times the teacher thinks, well, I'll take like 2 classes. That should be plenty of time to do it. And I think even for us, but if you're not used to using it all the time, like do 5 times as long as you think it's going to take, because it's hard to do all these steps together and have them brainstorm, plan, shoot it, edit it, and then the next day you're ready, go publish it. Like all of those steps to do them a little bit in depth, it just takes longer. And especially at the beginning, when you're a little bit more of a novice at it, I mean, you can rely and ask the kids, but if it's new to them too, it might take them a little while. And, you know, to give yourself a break, that it's going to take longer than you think. And knowing that before you go into the project, just know kind of planning wise that, you know, it might not be 2 classes for a 30-second commercial for world language. It might be 4 or 5 classes. It might take just a little bit longer than you think. And of course, we're talking about hands-on learning, and the best way to do it is you realize that after you're not going to make it, you know, in a class or 2 to do any of these, even little tiny projects.
Yeah, and I always sort of stress in the beginning with if I'm teaching teachers or students, you know, that the concept of the circle of skills, and how, you know, you get your basic skills and you just sort of push them out little by little and little by little, rather than trying to jump all the way to, you know, I always use like some sport as an analogy and say, like, you know, you can't dunk before you can dribble and all that kind of stuff. But that's one of the hardest things for me in my classroom, because my students expect to be experts immediately. And, you know, and that's like, it's the hardest thing for them. And I can see the frustration build. They might be really good at art. They might be really good at things. And then they see this, they're confronted with this thing that is very hard for them. And it's not a one-day thing. So, you know, it goes back to what Fawn was talking about, persistence and patience, you know, like just knowing like, hey, this is the first time you did this, you know, like you haven't made a movie before, you haven't made a video before, so don't expect to be great at it yet. You know, it's okay. And in fact, it's probably better to be terrible at it, because you can learn more, because you want to see how you can improve. And so I think that's an important aspect to really sort of set that goal before you set out to do it, and say, listen, you're going to be a little bit frustrated at times. It's going to be more difficult than you think. It's not easy, You know, the process is simple, but it's not easy.
And you know what, as an educator, I mean, if you have many sections of the same class, which happens sometimes, you know, you start figuring out all those little ways, like Andre, you were talking about before, of what you would do again and not do again. And, you know, you become more and more of an expert, the teaching side of it, to be maybe more of a facilitator than be traditional of you're going to talk for 40 minutes and give them all the directions. I think people get into a comfort zone after a while, because they can do it more than just that one period. I'm thinking of like middle school or high school, maybe, you know, where they have the kids, different kids, multiple periods. By the third or fourth time you're trying it, you're refining it the whole way as you go.
Yeah, you become a better teacher by the end of the day.
Yeah. So we're just about at to the top of the hour, and I didn't see any questions in the chat. I don't know, we have maybe a couple minutes if there are folks that had any questions for the panelists.
I'm going to throw one out there while we're thinking there, Ryan. I'm just really curious for the group, just the impact of TikTok and how videos are then utilized by students, and where you have seen that kind of mix in, and also where it may lead into issues of privacy and how do they work with some of the, what I'll call digital ethics of what you're shooting in video in that way. So just two different areas, but I'm just wondering maybe somehow they're interrelated.
It's funny, Sean, this came up yesterday in our discussion too, that remote learning, every single student, they shoot their video like this. They do not shoot their video like this because of TikTok. And then you go to import it in, and you have like letterbox on the left and right hand side the whole time, you know, and that's what they're used to seeing. And your second part, like in terms of copyright, I don't even use Google anymore. I mean, 1 million assets are in the WeVideo library of audio, video, still pictures, backgrounds, all of these different things. And I don't even steer my students any other places because I know that collection is going to be copyright free that they're going to use. And we still do get into discussions of copyright, but it's a lot less when they were just Googling to go find, you know, different pictures or animated GIFs or GIFs to put in their projects.
Yeah, it's a lesson. You know, you have to show them that, you know, it's you can't just grab your, you know, MP3 and throw it in there, you know, because you're going to get sued or whatever the case may be. And you have stock media and that's what that's for, you know. Luckily you didn't have to pay for it. But it also is a lesson in sort of research and digging, you know, like finding not just the right song, but the right piece of that song, you know. And I always sort of liken it to DJing back in the 80s, you know, and hip hop and sampling, you know. It's like, no, you're not just going to take one track and throw it back there. Like, look for that piece, look for that break, look for that moment that you get that sort of chill from, and use that part, you know, because that's going to be what sort of drives the emotion of the piece. You know, trying to get them to move away from just what they like into what works, you know, and don't just make it about, oh, I like this style, I like that style. What works for this? So, you know, it's just it's a discussion on ethics, you know, in terms of like, no, just use what you can, not what you want. And you can find the same types of things in stock media. You just got to spend a little more time listening to sometimes very, like, you know, weak elevator music for, you know, 2 hours, and you know, a lot of blips and bleeps, but it you know, it's all a learning experience. And I always tell them, you know, hit that little heart, you know, favorite it. Even if you don't use it for this project, you might use it for another project, something else might come up, you know. And if you don't like the introduction, you might like a part of it later on. So it's, you know, it's finding a little nuance. I think that's a lot of what it is especially in middle school, there's not a lot of subtlety and there's not a lot of nuance. And so I think teaching kids subtlety and nuance, you know, and not just like snatch and grab and put that in there because I like this song currently.
Like that question with my high school students, I would ask them that question when they would bring up, you know, a piece of, you know, media that they wanted to use in their video. And I would ask them if they could use it, and they would have to go do a little bit of research, and then they would share it with the rest of the class. what they found out about copyright. And I also think that in the process of creating these kinds of pieces, they become more critical as well. And so in the digital self-portrait project, we did a lot of students in their reflections wrote about how it changed the way they looked at social media, how they thought about the way that they were presenting themselves, the way that they were consuming it in different ways. Of course, it didn't mean that they stopped completely. They just saw it differently. And I think it raised awareness on a different kind of level.
I started using this year too. The media specialist in our school did a whole presentation on using TikTok, but as an educator resource. So go find Google tips on it, shooting in thirds, other video production things. So I don't necessarily have them use their phone to make TikToks, but I'm just starting to do it this year. This was an untapped resource I never really used in the past, and you have to weed through a lot of it. But there is some good educator things that are on there, and people who will, post tips every week, whether it be for Google things or WeVideo things or what have you.
Yeah, TikTok is my nemesis. I teach these kids all these amazing advanced production techniques, and then I see them making TikTok videos, and they're back to just like being in the center and doing their dances. Like, come on, at least use shoot in thirds or something, like show me that you got something out of the class. It turns back into like McDonald's video.
Well, right, we're at the top of the hour, and I want to thank our great friends at WeVideo, Ryan and Andre, Bruce, and Fawn for a great presentation. I think this has been really insightful for our members to kind of learn on some of the best ways to work on multimedia creation. We were doing a session yesterday talking about project-based learning, so this whole idea is, I think, spot on for a lot of us to look at. So thank you again, everyone, for your sharing us your insight. I just want to share a couple things that we've got coming in at NiceGate. We have many of you know you're part of our certification courses. So if you're looking at Google 1 and Google 2 and ISTE certification, we have different training that's setting up this month as we roll into March. Definitely look at that. We just started a book study series with Carl Hooker this week. If you want to, you probably can just check that out real quick and get in. We're going to work with him on Ready, Set, Fail. And Carl's going to be doing some other video drop-ins and connect with us live to kind of talk about his new book going along. Just also put into notes, we have other webinars that are occurring up this month and into March from Learn Platform, Lexia, and a new one from NWA, partnership that they're doing with the University of Chicago on systemic change. So if you're interested in that, or share that out with your colleagues, but they're picking up right now. And lastly, just as a reminder for our educators in New York, we offer free online courses as part of a grant we received from the New York State Department of Education. There are many different courses available for you to then go in and focus in if you want on library media specialist, if you're focusing in on ELL or Google Workspace. The CS and DF standards are going to be huge because we're moving to full implementation of those in the next few years here in New York. So definitely check those out. These are all free courses, all eligible for CTLE credit in New York. So they're available. Just go to nicegate.org and you'll see a place that you can sign up and start taking those courses right now as a gift that part of a grant that we got from the New York State Department of Education. So with that, I'm just checking if there's any other comments that I missed into chat. I don't see any. So I want to thank our great friends at WeVideo and especially Bruce, Fawn, and Ajay for a great presentation. I really do appreciate the work that you're doing with your within your students and how best that you're kind of sharing those resources going forward with using WeVideo. So thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your afternoon. We'll talk to you again soon on there. Take care now. Bye-bye.